And it's all you, John.
All right. First of all, thank you all for coming, and especially thank you, Pat, for doing this for us. If you have any questions as we're going along during Pat's presentation, please use the chat box texting down below so we can control that and give Pat all the time that we can. On the agenda, what we would like to do is just quickly introduce everybody. Of course, we know we've got Cedric Campbell, who is the president of our club. You got my ugly face over here. I'm a youth chair for the Greater Lake Forest Rotary Club. Pat Dossett is our guest speaker today, who I'm very excited about talking about leadership, responsibility, and team. And William, what's your last name?
Buller.
Wooler. Okay, William just moved into 8th grade and is going through all of his issues. Jolynn, what grade are you in now?
11.
11th. You're the junior.
Yeah.
Almost there, but not quite. So you can be, big lady on the team. And last but not least, we have Lane Calvert, who is our, and I've got my cat here. Lane Calvert is the District 5320 youth chair.
Interact chair.
Interact chair. Okay. With that, let's go to Pat. What we want to do is give Pat his opportunity. We're going to go to.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Let me just ask real quickly. So the intent of this program was the genesis of what, so that we can all, like Pat can get up to speed too, is how did this all come about, and how many have we done so far, and all that kind of good stuff.
That's true. This is our 7th Zoom.
Wow.
The 7 Zooms that we have all been international discussions with someone who has been a middle school and high school participant in their respective countries. If you go to our website and go to the student link and drop down to video, you can see all the different Zooms that are there full length that you can see where we have had participation. It's been everything from South Sudan to Nicaragua to Germany to Canada. We're coming up on, I think France is in September. But it was originally to get us international connections with and get us to understand what other countries are like. And we learned some great lessons about how different middle school and high school is in other countries than it is here in our United States now. Blessed we are. From that, I was running short on a speaker for this month.
Don't say that.
No, I'm sorry. I was kidding. I got the idea of Pat, and I've known Pat for quite a while. He is an ex-lieutenant Navy SEAL for 8.5 years, Pat?
9.5, yeah.
9.5 years. So we've got some great things to learn from Pat on leadership, responsibility, and team. And I'd like for us to either use the chat down below for particular questions while Pat is presenting, or at the end, we've reserved some time for Q&A. So what else am I supposed to say?
Well, and just so you guys know, in the chat box, I brought in 2 key dates. The one was the 21st, one was the 28th for the back to school nights.
Yeah. And
I also put in there the link, Pat, if you ever want to go, and
awesome.
you can go into for the past videos. I think we're missing 2, but you get the gist of it when you look at some of these things. And I'll interject one thing. What was pretty interesting, I think, William, you were probably in that call where we had a young woman from Iran come in to talk to us about what it was like to be a student a teenager in Iran. And you're not allowed to have any kind of makeup and stuff like that in Iran at that age. And so she decided to catch up with some of her friends, and she had a little bit of makeup on and so on.
Lipstick.
And the morality police caught up with her and said they were going to slice her lips open so she could see what red lips really look like. But she ended up having to call up her dad. Her dad had to pay a ransom in order to be removed from the morality police. And so when you talk about those kind of things to somebody who's, at Serrano or Rancho Santa Margarita High School or whatever it might be here, and they're, they drive a Tesla, or maybe they've got an iPhone, and you hear about some of the restrictions that you have in other countries, it really is daunting. It's just really amazing to hear. And our kids on the calls have just kind of gone like, wow, I'm glad I'm not in Iran, or I'm in South Sudan or Nicaragua or wherever it might be. And they get an appreciation for what goes on in our country and what goes on with other countries. So I like the fact that we're doing something a little different this time with your experience, because I think it might be good for us to expand, not just with what's going on with other countries, but perhaps other occupations and things like that, that, the students might find some value in too. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about the genesis from the program and any specific example of what may have happened. William, you've been on all of them. Was there one speaker or one specific example that popped out at you and went like, wow, whether it was Canada or Nicaragua or Sudan with the
I think Iran popped out, the Iran story popped out to me the most.
yeah. How about you, Jolene?
Yeah, I think Iran really had a big impact because I remember someone as like the spectator was watching and she said she was also from Iran. So that's kind of pretty cool to relate that.
Yeah, and even in that Iran, there was a woman that she goes to Mission Viejo High School now,
Yeah.
and she said when she moved from Iran, she sat down in a chair, and there was a boy that sat next to her, and she panicked because boys were not allowed to be next to girls in Iran at that age, and she didn't know what to do. So it was just kind of interesting to hear those different cultures. But anyway, John, I didn't mean to derail that. I just wanted to share a little bit about that and let you guys know I put some stuff in the chat box.
Let's get to Patrick and let me give you a little of a dossier. He's co-founder and CEO of Made For, a program he designed alongside a team of subject matter experts in the fields of neuroscience, psychology, health, and wellness to empower individuals to be their best. To date, Pat has directly helped over 20,000 people on their personal transformation journey and continues to share his wisdom as the best-selling author of the Made For Method. Prior to Made For Method, Pat served in various leadership roles, such as an officer or lieutenant in the U.S. Navy SEAL teams, and later in the fields of technology and nonprofit to create positive change and scale. Pat has a BS from the U.S. Navy Academy and an MBA from the Wharton School of Business, and is a recipient of numerous awards and recommendations for his service and leadership. With that, Pat, it's all yours.
All right. Well, thanks, John, and thank you, Cedric. Thank you, Lane, William, Dylan, for having me. I'm excited for this conversation, and I really want this to be super, super informal. So, if at any point you have a question, just stick your hand up, and I'll call on you directly. I think we have a small enough group that we can be pretty free flowing there. So, I'll just dive right in. My journey for the SEAL teams really began when I was in 7th grade. I read a book that I don't even remember how I got this book, but somehow this book came across my desk and I read it, and it was about the SEALs, and it was the first thing I'd ever heard about the SEAL teams. And when I read it, there was something about this story about this elite special operations, special military units that just captivated me. It sounded like an amazing adventure. It sounded like these people that participated in the SEAL teams were just superhuman, that there was they were real life superheroes walking the planet, and something about it just got my wheels turning. I was like, wow. Instead of saying like I could never do that for whatever reason, I thought to myself, like, I have to do that. Like, that is what I absolutely want to do. And so I started just reading more and more as the years went by. And I was fortunate enough when I was graduating from high school, I was fortunate enough to get picked up for a spot to the U.S. Naval Academy. So I went to the Naval Academy for college, and really the only reason I went there is because I knew I wanted to be a SEAL. And when I was looking at schools with my college guidance counselor, there was a school called Navy on the list, and I was like, well, I want to be a SEAL, and I'll go there, and hopefully it works out. And I was fortunate enough that it did. So in 2002, May of 2002, I graduated from the Naval Academy. And a few months later, I began SEAL training. And the first part of SEAL training is about 8 months long. It's called Basic Underwater Demolition School. And it's really designed to take a lot of very motivated, very fit individuals that have worked really hard to try to become a SEAL, and to run them through a very challenging program and to see who really has what it takes to be a SEAL. And then once you graduate from BUD/S, they'll spend a lot more money to give you specialized training and give you about another year of training before you make it onto a team. But I think it was in October of 2002 when I started SEAL training. And I started with 220 other individuals. These people were super fit. They had all worked very hard. They'd spent, sometimes years working to get to get to that place. And SEAL training is voluntary. So at any point in time, if you decide you don't want to continue, you can ring this bell 3 times, and then you're done. You can get warm, or you can get dry and be done and go do something else. And so started training with 220 very fit individuals. And I just remember thinking to myself, wow, like all of these people look the part. They're all big, imposing, fit individuals. And some people actually even looked more the part. They looked like real life superheroes. And I found myself a little intimidated at the start. So we go through training. 5 weeks in, we had gone from 220 people down to 150. And then that 6th week of training is something called Hell Week. And Hell Week is a little bit unique in terms of training in the military. It's 5.5 days long. And for 5.5 days, you don't get any sleep. I take that back. You get about an hour of sleep. They give you 30 minutes on day 3, and then a little bit more time on day 4 into day 5. But so you're awake for 5.5 days. You're in and out of the Pacific Ocean nonstop, and so you get really, really cold. They actually have these tables that tell them how long they can leave you in the ocean before you start to get hypothermic and before it starts to become dangerous. And then they'll pull you out of the ocean, the instructors, and make you do all these exercises, and they'll put you right back into the ocean, and you play this game for about a week. And so you're really tired, you're really cold, you're running everywhere, carrying these boats on your head, or you're carrying telephone poles, logs, doing all of this crazy physical stuff, and it's very challenging. But the thing that was most impressed upon me during Hell Week, so we went into it with 150 students. We came out with 36, and then we ended up graduating out of that original 220, 17 of those original 220 that finished SEAL training. And what struck me about those 17 individuals was not how impressive they were, but rather how unremarkable they were. And in fact, all of the biggest, fastest, strongest people, the people that most look the part, that you'd say, hey, they're right out of central casting. They look like they're ready to be in a Hollywood movie. All of those people that had all of the physical gifts were the first to leave. And I was just like, I was blown away by that. I was like, wow, what is going on? And these 17 people that were there at the end were so unremarkable looking. Like you wouldn't have been able to pick them out from a lineup. They were just like some skinny people, some bigger people, varying heights. They looked rather unimpressive. But those 17 individuals had something unique about the mindset that they brought to the SEAL training, and that mindset is something that continued to get built up over the course of their time in the SEAL teams. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So I know the overarching topic is leadership, responsibility, and team. But I really want to talk about mindset and the role that mindset plays in performance. And then I'll bring it back into how it affects the leadership, responsibility, and team here at the end. So there are 3 elements of mindset that I want to focus on. And by no means are these exhaustive, but these are 3 ones that I can attach a story to, and I think they'll resonate with you. And I think it's a good way to focus our time. So the first one is this sense of getting overwhelmed. You all probably are all familiar with this. Whether Jolynn, it's you preparing for a big swim meet, or maybe it's you're coming up on final exams, or William, maybe you've got a big project you're working on, or whatever it is. There's something at some point in our lives that we all just feel like, hey, we're getting overwhelmed by how massive the task is in front of us, right? It's just like it's too big to even process. And what we saw in SEAL training is there are really 2 ways to tackle this feeling of overwhelm. One is to focus on how big something is and how challenging something might be, and to really try to tackle something all in one go. And the people that do that oftentimes find that they can't continue just because it's too much. It's too much for them to focus on, to think like that they can do it or they can achieve it, and they ended up quitting in training or quitting later down the road. And so one thing that I think SEALs have do a really good job at is this recognizing that we all have this ability to move the finish line in whatever it is that we're doing. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'll give you an example from my time in the teams. there was I spent 3 years on a team called the SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team. These are these mini submarines that the SEAL teams have. And so a mini submarines is something that we launch off a really big submarine. They're wet submersibles. And so when you're sitting inside this mini submarine, you're actually sitting inside. It's kind of like a dark closet that's filled up with cold water. And I was in charge of the team in the back of the mini submarine. So we'd have a pilot and a navigator that would sit up front. And then in the back of these mini submarines, we'd have 4 individuals that would be sitting very close to one another. So I would sit here as the mission commander, a teammate would sit next to me, someone would sit in my lap, someone would sit in their lap. And then we pull all of our equipment in and close the doors. And by the time everything got packed into this mini submarine and the doors closed, you have about this much room to move around, and it's completely pitch black. You can't see anything while you're back there, and you're breathing underwater the whole time. So these SDV operations are some of the more challenging operations that I think anyone conducts in the U.S. military. You will actually find yourself when you're on one of these operations in the back of that mini submarine, sometimes for 8 hours at a time. And you go through this cycle of when you start, you're really hot because it's hot in the submarine and you're wearing all these wetsuits and you got all this equipment. And then about 30 minutes into an operation, you start to cool off. The cold ocean water is flowing in. About an hour in, you're actually kind of cold and you're shivering a little bit. About 2 hours in, you start cramping because you're dehydrated and you don't really have a lot of room to move around. About 4 hours in, you start getting seasick because we fly these mini submarines at about 10 to 15 feet underwater. And so you actually can't see the horizon. So you have no frame of reference. But because we drive these mini submarines at a fairly shallow depth, you're actually susceptible to open ocean swell. So the mini submarine is moving like this. And so if you're like me and you have the misfortune of getting seasick very easily, you're getting sick, so you're seasick, and sometimes you're throwing up underwater, which is not fun. But it's this game of constantly thinking about, all right, what is the next finish line that I can make it to? Can I make it another hour? Can I make it 30 minutes? Can I make it 5 minutes? Can I make it 3 more breaths to work my way through the seasickness? But remember, you're back there for 8 hours, and 8 hours is the point in time where the mini submarine stops and it lets my team out of the back of the mini submarine to go do our operation and go do our mission. So that's just your ride to work to start. So I like to tell that story or have that example because it's something that is so visceral, and everyone can imagine being cold and being cramped and being tired and dehydrated and maybe not feeling your best, but knowing that you're going to be in this position for 8 hours and there's no way to get off this ride is really, really difficult. But the same principle that I talk about, this idea of moving the finish line, applies whether you're in a mini submarine. It applies whether you're, starting training for a long season and maybe have some big audacious goals that you're going for. It applies whether you're working on a big project or whatever the thing may be, recognizing that if the enormity of the task that you're taking on or the challenge that you're facing is too much, that it makes you feel less capable, or it makes you feel like it makes you feel less confident, less capable, or like you don't even know where to start, move that finish line closer, move it to something where it feels like it's manageable and that you can move toward, and that inspires your confidence. So it's not that, hey, I'm going to tackle the whole season in one fell swoop. It's not that I'm going to tackle the entire project, but I'm just going to write the first page, or I'm going to focus on the first practice, or sometimes it's going to be, hey, I'm going to focus just getting to practice. And then once I get to practice, I'm going to get in the water, or I'm going to get, into whatever the next thing is. And so you have the ability to move the finish line, I think, is something that is an incredibly powerful concept. And if you can internalize it and practice it, it will help you build a more resilient mindset. And this is, I would say, one of the key components for a mindset of a SEAL. The second one is this idea of when you're involved in a situation where maybe you don't have total control, maybe you're moving into a new school, maybe you're moving into a new competitive arena, maybe there's some change in your life that's happening, something that you're affected by and you're part of, and you don't necessarily have control over everything that's going on. And this feeling of like not having power or not having agency or feeling powerless can really put us in a bad spot, right? It can make us feel, again, less capable, less confident, and almost paralyze us where we don't do anything. And so one of the things that the SEALs do when they find themselves in these situations is having a bias for action. And so taking action, however small, and exerting control over anything in your environment that you can exert control over is an incredibly powerful tool that will allow you to turn that dial down on feeling powerless and actually allow you to start being more capable, more confident, and able to navigate and affect the environment that you're in. And so one example that I like always go to here is I remember the first time that I was on a target conducting an operation, and we were going after someone. This was in Iraq. We were going after a person that had been setting up all of these IEDs, these improvised explosive devices that were targeting various convoys. And so we were going to capture this person. And I remember it was my first operation going on this target. And right when we got on target, there were lots of explosions going off, and there was lots of sounds and noise, and it was a little bit of this sense of like overwhelm, like, wow, there's a lot of things happening. First time in this environment, I want to do my job well and I perform, but I'm hearing all these things that I don't necessarily have control over, and I could feel it start to take control over me in a way that wasn't going to help me. And so I remember this going back to this idea of like, all right, when you can't control anything, find something that you can control and control it. And the thing that I always come back to, and that a lot of my SEAL teammates would come back to, is this the idea of breath. And so just recognizing that you always have the ability to control your breath, and in doing so, you can control your body in a very, very powerful way. And so even something as simple as if you take a quick inhale and then a longer exhale, so shorter inhale, longer exhale, that actually calms your body down, and it makes you more present and more capable at navigating whatever's in front of you. So it's this cool internal tool that you have at all times that you can always lean on. But whether it's breath, whether it's checking your equipment, whether it's going through a routine, putting on your swim cap, whatever the thing might be, when you exert control over something small, it actually releases a little bit of dopamine inside your brain. It makes you feel more confident, and it makes you capable in exerting control on the next step and the next step and the next step. So very quickly, when you're in a situation that initially feels overwhelming, and then you start to exert control, you find that, hey, very quickly, it's not overwhelming, and I'm able to navigate it in a way that suits me best. And so that's the second element, I think, of a SEAL mindset that's pretty critical. And then the third one, this one is a little bit counterintuitive, but I think very, very important, and really ties into the role of being a teammate or being on a team. And it's this idea that if you're ever feeling isolated, alone, sad, stressed, or you're feeling sorry for yourself for whatever reason, maybe you fell short on something, or maybe someone's picking on you, or whatever the thing may be. If you're ever feeling in this place where you're feeling sorry for yourself and you're feeling isolated and alone, the very best thing that you can do is actually not to focus on yourself. It's to try to find someone else to help. Is there someone else that can you shift your attention and your focus on trying to identify someone else that you can do something for? Could be a parent, could be a friend, could be a teammate, could be even someone, a stranger or a classmate that you don't even know very well. But when you make that shift in your attention to what are the needs of someone else and how can I be in service of those needs, and you take action to help someone, again, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be just like try to cheer someone up or do something kind for someone else. Even the smallest of acts can change the trajectory of that person's day, and you start to feel the reverberating effects of that. So you lift that person up, right away, they're going to make you feel better about yourself. Your own pain and your own challenges are going to be lessened, and you're going to be in a place where, again, very quickly, you make this shift to being more capable, more confident, feeling connected rather than disconnected. And it's this really powerful shift. And so the story I always like to tell for this is in Hell Week, that 5th or 6th week of training that I mentioned earlier, sometimes you find yourself running with this boat on your head, and you get broken up into boat crews of 6 people. the boats don't necessarily start very heavy, but over time they fill with water and sand, and sometimes there's instructors inside jumping on up and down while you're running with this boat. And by the time everyone finishes Hell Week, everyone's got a bald spot on top of the head, on their head, where the boat has rubbed off all of their hair. So it's a very, very hard place to be. But if you're under that boat and you're suffering and you're having a hard time, the boat crews that perform best oftentimes have a leader. It generally starts with one person. It doesn't have to be the senior person. It can be anyone on the team, but a leader, someone who is suffering, and instead of worrying about their own pain and discomfort, they try to look out at their teammates and say, "Oh, what can I do for you? Hey, cheer someone up. Hey, you got this," or "Let me change positions with you," or "What can I do to help you?" Or even just giving a word of encouragement. That energy is infectious. It lifts that person up who you direct it towards, and it gets reverberated back. And very quickly, the whole team orients around this idea of, how can I be in service to the other people on my team? And if you've ever been on a team like that, it is an incredible way of being, but it's also just an incredible mindset shift to internalize. So those are, I'd say, three key elements of those people, those 17 individuals that were unremarkable, that made it through training. But I would say continue to get reinforced over my time in the team. So one is this idea that if you're feeling overwhelmed, if something seems too big, recognize that you always control the finish line. And if you want to move that finish line closer in to a point where you feel confident in your ability to get there, do it, because that is something that is entirely within your control. Doesn't matter the challenge that you're facing. The second is, if you're feeling powerless in a situation and it's starting to overwhelm you, take action, however small. Find something that you can control and exert control in that thing. And when you do that, having that bias for action and controlling the things that you can control, even if it's just your breath, that is going to make you more confident, more capable, and very quickly that feeling of powerlessness is going to fade, and you're gonna find yourself feeling more capable and confident navigating that. And then the third thing is this idea of, if you're feeling sorry for yourself, if you're going through a particular challenging time, feeling alone, sad, stressed, whatever that may be, sometimes the most powerful thing that you can do is to take a moment to focus your attention and effort on serving someone else's needs. How can I help someone else? And in doing so, you lift yourself up in the process. So those are three elements of mindset. I'm going to talk for about 5 more minutes, and then I want to open up to questions.
Hey, Pat, just so you know, and just so you guys know, I just summarized what I thought I heard and put it in the chat, so you guys can pull up any of that information of what Pat just talked about. So Pat,
Awesome.
Keep me honest, but I think my quick scripting notes here, I think that's what you covered, is those 3 points there. So it's in the chat box if you guys want.
Great. So this is specific to Jolyn and William. You guys have a massive, what I will, and I'm not overselling this here, you guys have a superpower that everyone else on this call wants. And this is, I'm telling you this with 100% certainty, because the science supports it, but also my personal experience supports it, is that you all have this ability to rewire your brain in a way that no one else possesses. So there's this concept called neuroplasticity, which is that our brains change as a result of our experience and what we do in the environments that we find ourselves in. So this ability to rewire our brain, or my friend Andrew Huberman's a neuroscientist, he calls this self-directed adaptive plasticity. This ability to rewire our brain means that you can change your mindset. It means that you can change your experience of life. It really means that you can change anything. So if there's something that you're trying to learn, something that you're trying to do, or whatever that thing is, like you have a capacity and ability to do that far exceeds anyone else on this call. So past the age of 25, there's really only 2 ways to change your brain or to rewire your brain. And one is a short, intense experience, like birth of a child or a car accident or getting married. So these peak experiences. The other one requires consistent, repeated effort over time with very clear attention awareness around what I'm doing and the effect that it's having. But it takes a tremendous amount of effort once you get older to change your brain. It's still possible, it just takes more effort. But you have the capacity right now to change your brain in ways that or can transform your life and the lives of those around you in some really powerful ways. So these three elements of mindset that I'm talking about, if there's something that is interesting to you or inspiring to you, or there's other things that you're interested in or aspiring towards, just know that you have this capacity to change more so than anyone else. So I know you guys all probably have various teams that you're on, different roles that you fill, whether within your family or your school or on your athletic teams. But the truth of the matter is, like, everyone on this call is a leader. Sometimes we're just leading one person, and that person is ourselves. And so it's just so, I think it's really powerful to know that when we're leading ourselves, if we can do so through this, by adopting some of these elements of mindset, it's going to help us unlock the best in ourselves, and it's going to help us unlock the best in those around us. And so, aside from these three elements of mindset that I've talked about, for you all, I would say the three things that if I could go back and talk to my 8th grade self, or my junior high school year self, or even while I was at the academy or while I was in the teams, I think the three things I would tell myself to always aspire towards are to always be kind, to always stay curious, and to always try to have fun. Because if you're always kind, if you have an orientation towards kindness, you're going to help, you're going to lift others up in the process, and they're going to lift you up. So you're going to get the most out of your teammates, and by and large, they're going to help you get the most out of yourself. And so always trying to have an orientation towards kindness. How can I be kind in small moments and big moments, and just kind of think about this kindness as like a drum beat, that you're just constantly hitting that drum will reap tremendous rewards. Staying curious is just this recognition that it doesn't matter if you're 15, 51, 91, like, we're always all learning. We never have it completely figured out. I've spent a lot of time studying leadership and applying leadership skills and on a whole variety of teams. And every day I learn something new about leadership. And so if you have this orientation, or continue to cultivate this orientation towards curiosity and just really staying interested, like, oh, what's going on there? Like asking questions and recognizing that the perspective you have today is probably going to be different than the one you have in a few years' time. And it's always going to continue to be updated. But if you keep cultivating curiosity, it's going to help you learn, it's going to help you grow, and it's going to help you navigate the situations you find yourself in all the more better. And the last one is just have fun. And I think this on the surface sounds kind of superficial. Like, oh yeah, have fun, like that's great. But what I mean by this is stay true to yourself, to recognize, like, what are the things that drive you, that excite you, that you're interested in, that you're passionate about? Because if you're doing those things, you're going to have fun. You're going to do them really well. You're going to get better at them. You're going to become an expert. You're going to become a leader in whatever it is that you're doing. And so just always be thinking in the back of your mind, like, hey, am I having fun? Am I enjoying this? It's not to say that practice isn't challenging, or that there's not times where we have to exert tremendous effort. But when you find the opportunity to combine passion and perseverance in a way that is fun for you, or in things that are interesting to you, that is when you're going to unlock your full potential, and you're going to do great things. So that's all I have to share. Hopefully some of that was helpful or resonated, but I'd love to answer any questions that you guys might have.
So,
You're
William
not-
and Jolynn, the question I would ask you guys, I would ask you guys, especially, I think, Pat, you did a great job. I wish I had listened to this when I was 12. Life would have been
Me too.
a lot different, from that standpoint there. But I think I really appreciate the fact that the guys are on the call. But Jolynn, you're an athlete. You're out there swimming. You're working in leadership programs. You've got the MUN program, all those kind of things there. I got to think that you feel like you're so overwhelmed, using the words that Pat had shared. You're overwhelmed. You feel like you're powerless and so on. How can this help you to get through some of that?
Yeah, I think one important thing that Pat mentioned, which I think is also where like it crosses my mind sometimes not to give up, is enjoying the path. So when I'm doing MUN, it's not something that I always enjoy when giving speech in front of everyone. So I try to think of ways that I can like improve so I can be better. And at the awarding ceremony, when I win the award, it will be like really rewarding. So at the next conference, I tend to think I gotta do better so I can like enjoy more and engage more in the conference so to win an award and also be like try to like make friends in the process of MUN. Similar in swimming, like I think the outcome isn't that important when you're like enjoying the process. When you're enjoying the process and you're having fun and you're training really hard, you ultimately get the reward that like should be yours, and the process will determine your outcome.
Yeah. Wow. Pretty insightful. How about you,
Jolene,
Lynn?
Jolene, you should have given this talk. That's such a great point. I always, it's something I try to stress a lot, is the focusing on the process and rewarding the process, because the outcomes, again, to your point, we can't control the outcomes. The only thing that we control is our process and how we're engaging that. And if we find a way to reward that and enjoy that, we're going to get the most out of it. And the
Yeah,
outcomes oftentimes take care of themselves. So such a great point.
thanks.
How about you, William?
I think one thing that was really big for me was moving the finish line. I always struggle in team projects to manage my time correctly or to manage when I have to get things done. So I think moving the finish line is going to be really helpful for me.
I love that. Yeah, it's funny. I'm just pulling up. I'm going to share this. My friend Andrew Huberman and I wrote an op-ed a while back when COVID kicked off, kind of talking about some of these concepts. I put it up there in the chat, and so it'll be a good tool for, or good something for you guys to go back and reference if you ever want to revisit any of these lessons. But yeah, William, I think it's just such a good point that like that moving the finish line. I think it's something we hear often growing up. That's like, oh, just take it one step at a time, or focus on the small thing, and then the big things take care of themselves. But I never found that to be. I don't know, for whatever reason, that never really resonated with me. But when I started to understand that, like, oh, the finish line is actually completely arbitrary, and I'm the one that controls that, and that when in controlling it, I can move it to a place that inspires my confidence and makes me feel capable and can get me where I want to go. And that is just, it's such a powerful unlock. And I can tell you in Hell Week, particularly, like you'll find yourself at times focusing on trying to get through the day, get to the next meal. Sometimes it's like, hey, I don't think you're like, there's no way I'm going to make it through the end of this day, but my eyes can see 10 feet in front of me. And that's my finish line right now. I'm going to make it the next 10 feet. And once I get there, I'm going to like pat myself on the back, and then I'm going to see what's going to happen, what's the next finish line. And so this game of moving that finish line to a place that feels manageable and navigable, it can work wonders. So I'm excited to
I've
hear
got
how
a
you guys
question
might
for
apply
you,
that.
Pat.
Yeah.
Before the COVID, my own club, my Anaheim Rotary Club, had 3 JROTCs as interacts. And we also had Navy and JROTCs that were interacts, and Air Force. We had them all, even a Marine one at Orange High. But after the COVID, we haven't been able to reopen that relationship between the military on-campus programs and the interacts, if you're familiar with interact and what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Have you run into this before, or
No, I just know from what John's told me on Interact what you guys do, but I wasn't aware that that those relationships have been severed, or that you haven't been able to get it restarted. That's unfortunate.
Pat, let me ask you a question, because I think Lane brought up an interesting point, just a little bit on the side note here. During COVID, everybody's masked, everybody's staying away from each other, all that kind of stuff there. How did the Navy SEALs deal with that? I don't think they put everything on hold and stop and say, okay, we can't have any more military, recruiting or actions or training, et cetera, et cetera. So what happened Did you guys stop everything, or did they just do it in secrecy, or?
Yeah, no, we continued, but there was definitely a little bit more restriction and isolation. So, in typically during SEAL training, the students would be let out on the weekends and be able to go off base and do, get some personal time. All of that went away. And so we just got a little bit more insular and isolated
So
through COVID.
So question number two to that point there, I know that, for instance, my daughter and my son, who were in high school during that COVID time period there, lost some of the socialization skills and so on, and had to rethink the way they trained. And statistics have suggested that those that had to go through that, when they became adults, when they became into their new business careers, fell short of what other people had to bring to the table. Do you feel that because they had a different playing field than previous Navy SEALs who went through training and didn't get the chance to go home and spend time with their family, did we lose anything in that process? Are they a little, I won't say weaker, but are they less focused? Did they get a lot of privileges where other guys before didn't get a chance? How did that impact? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I would say no, we're ruthless about our standards, and so our standards don't change, and you have to meet the standards, and so the quality of candidate that came out during COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID, hasn't changed. You get the best coming out of it. So, and I think where some people really struggled during COVID is I think they got isolated as individuals. For us, we were isolated on teams. So it's not like guys were by themselves. We were with, our teammates or our classes and that. So we had a little bit of benefit that maybe others did not.
Yeah, I asked that because I know that
That's a good question.
my daughter went through nursing school. She went to Baylor University. She actually started with the Air Force ROTC. Wanted to be on the field. Had what do you call psoriasis. So she was automatically DOR'd, even though her scores and everything else were really great. My son started at the Naval Academy. He ended up at Purdue University in the engineering field because he realized that trying to be an engineer and trying to be a Navy officer together was really a challenge. You talk about having to bite a giant elephant. That was really kind of a hard thing. And he literally sat down with us and said, I have to cut this elephant into smaller pieces because I can't eat it. So you called it changing the finish line. He talked about cutting the elephant into smaller pieces to eat it.
Yeah.
And ended up DORing, but is now fully licensed. He's now an engineer and so on and so forth, and he's doing a great job. But the reason I brought that up is because people were saying, like, if you had a choice, if you were in a surgical situation and you had a choice between someone who was fully trained pre-COVID as a doctor versus someone who took Zoom classes, online classes and finished up their doctorate that way, who would you feel more comfortable with,
Sure.
And that question came up in a lot of different debates, which was, I think I'd choose the guy or that woman who actually went through the whole process, as opposed to someone who took a shortcut and got their degree, but they got it through Zoom. So I don't know if the military was the same thing, but it sounds like it was not.
Yeah, I think just the nature of our job, it has to be hands-on. No one can do SEAL training over Zoom. So
Yeah.
we're a little bit more fortunate that way. But
Pat, can you-
hold on, Jolyn and William, I'd love to hear from you guys. Are there any questions? Because I know we only have about 10 more minutes left, but are there any questions you have for me? I mean, I've seen a lot. I spent didn't really talk about it, but I spent almost 10 years in the SEAL teams. I spent a few years at Google. I spent some time in nonprofit. I spent the last 7 years working in entrepreneurship, starting a company alongside a few other individuals. And so there are any questions that you have on my experience that I can be helpful for you? Because ultimately this is about giving you guys insights that are helpful.
Yeah, I kind of was really interested when I first see Navy SEAL, because I really wasn't really familiar with that. So if you could explain like how you get into that, that'll be great.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a great question. So in the military, we have different branches of service. So the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and the Coast Guard. And each branch of service has a specialty. And so in the Navy, our specialty is the maritime environment. And so anything that has to do with the ocean, or projecting power from the ocean is really where the Navy spends its resources and time. So aircraft carriers, submarines, fighter planes, anything that would be involved in that maritime environment. But most of those assets are what we call conventional assets. So they're really big ships, and they require big teams to work those big assets. There's another part of the Navy that's called the more of like a special operations side. This is where the Navy SEALs fall. And so Navy SEALs, much smaller force. There's probably a couple of thousand at any given time. And those 2,000 individuals cover down on the entire world on all the various commitments that the SEALs might have to be involved in. But SEALs spend most of their time training from the maritime environment. And so we specialize in launching from submarines, on small boats, jumping out of airplanes, working out of helicopters. You kind of name it. Sea, air, and land is what SEAL stands for. So really work across a variety of environments. But our primacy is in and around the maritime environment, or leaving water, going on to land. Since 9/11, since September 9/11, the SEALs have spent a lot of time in more landlocked countries and environments, just because that's where most of the work has been done. So like Osama bin Laden was captured by Navy SEALs. There's been a number of other high level individuals that the SEALs have been involved in saving, whether it's on the saving side or on the capturing side. So that's a little bit about the SEAL teams and special operations. But the Navy SEALs are considered maybe one of the preeminent and more elite branches of the U.S. military. And SEAL training, and specifically, is probably the hardest training that exists on the planet as it relates to the military.
Hey, John,
What age do you come in?
before we bring Lane on, do you have anything? You've got a very close
Yes.
relationship with the SEALs.
Oh, sorry.
Hold
Sorry to
on.
interrupt.
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Jolene.
Jolene, go.
Jolene.
Yeah, I gotta leave right now because
Oh.
I have a meeting right after this. Sorry so much about that, but I really enjoyed today's meeting with y'all. Thank you so much.
So
Thanks for
Jolene,
being here,
hopefully
Jolene.
we'll
Have a
see
great
you.
season.
Hopefully we can see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow, let me text you like around like 9 p.m. today, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Lynn, can
Thank
you
you.
hold on for just 1 second, because I want to ask Pat, can you talk about team and team development and team building? Because that's what we in our Interact Club, and even in our Rotary, need to spend a lot of effort and time. So can you help us with that?
Yeah, Jolene, I'll give you the 10-second thing, because I know you got to jump.
Yeah.
The reason I talk about mindset and I talk about neuroplasticity and the opportunity, and that we're all ultimately leaders of at least a team of one, is that how we show up for ourselves determines how we can show up for other people. And so if we're on a team, trying to bring out the best in yourself so that you can bring out the best in those around you, I think is always the best way to go. There's a lot that can go into that, but that as a framework of just a way of being on a team, I think is a really good one. And that final point on mindset of trying to find ways to be in action to help others is a great framework to have and being on a team. So Jolene, have a great night. Enjoy your next meeting. Have an awesome season.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jolene.
Take care.
Yeah, text me later.
Okay, bye.
Lane, you want to share what what's on your plate?
Well, we have about 40 to 50 different interacts, and they're all different kinds of interacts, like the one we're on tonight. We have multiple school interacts called community interacts, and we have on-campus ones. We also have junior high. Interact now includes junior high and high school. And so we have over 1,000 kids that are involved from the high school programs that we call Interact in our district of 5320. And we get together quarterly for an in-person either service opportunity, which is coming up for, I don't know if you're familiar with World Cleanup Day. That's coming up, Coastal Cleanup Day, September 23rd. But all over the world, we'll be cleaning up beaches and different waterways, conservation-wise. And then we do our own training at least once a year, where we'll train the officers of the Interacts on the campuses in a central area. We bring young people together. We have a program called RILA too, that I don't know if they mentioned it to you, but it's a leadership course that's done by Rotary, but we take other people. We take at-risk kids, we take alternative high schools, we take as well as the straight A students from all over our area, and they spend a couple hours for 3 days online with skill leadership opportunities, and then also 3 days on the mountains doing more trust activities, going through the trees and all that kind of stuff. So those are kind of our youth programs, RILA, Interact, and then we have Rotaract at the high school, the college level, and young adults that
Actually,
make up
Pat-
the youth programs.
Actually, Pat, I think your story would be well received at one of these functions, whether it's the district quarterly event or RILA, or even at a club level. Lane, I think that's something you guys might want to have a conversation
I'd
offline.
love to get back in with the military connection, because we also used to bring the Marines from Camp Pendleton up to do service projects with our clubs. And a lot of our clubs help take care of the spouses of the Marines when they're afield.
Yeah.
And so there's been a really strong relationship in the past between the military and Rotary. And I'd love to strengthen that, especially in the south areas where these guys are coming from, and down in San Clemente and right around Pendleton, where we've got actual military right here in our area that are active.
Hey, John, you got 4 minutes before we lose our Zoom. So if you want to wrap up anything with
Well,
William or Pat or anybody.
I actually just wanted to give Pat a little self-time to talk a little bit more about your company called Made For, because that's, I know all of this ties together, but just give you a chance to talk about Made For.
Is
Sure.
that the nonprofit that you're talking about?
No, Made For is a company I started about 7 years ago, and kind of turned it into a book, The Made For Method, which is available on Amazon. Yeah, I'm happy to plug Made For. Before I do, William, do you have any questions for me before we jump? And no worries if not. I just want to make sure I didn't.
I don't think so. I think I heard
Okay.
everything. Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, Made For in a nutshell is a program that I started about 7 years ago with a neuroscientist named Andrew Huberman out of Stanford University and a number of other scientists from different backgrounds. But the idea was, can we help people like us who are not in eighth grade or maybe over the age of 25? Can we find ways to help people like us build better habits for both physical and mental health? And can we do so in a way that allows us to build a more resilient mindset? And so we developed this program, spent about a year developing the program, a year working with around 1,200 people across the country in beta. And then, like John said, we've worked with about 20,000 members to date. And it's been great. We focus on very foundational practices. These are things like hydration and gratitude and social connection, movement, rest, breath, nature, all things that I think we intuitively know are good for us, but maybe we don't understand the science of what's going on when we're engaging our bodies in these practices. And so we help inspire people to action in small ways that sum to great effects. And that's what we've been doing, and it's been a lot of fun.
I just posted that link, if you're okay with that, Pat, onto a Facebook page which featured this dialogue.
Oh, great! That's amazing.
So I think more people need to hear what you had to say.
Awesome, thank you.
So what is the best way to get in touch with you and the Made For method?
We probably on Instagram is the best way, at Made For, MADEFOR, or you can find me at @MadeFor_Pat. I'll just put these in the chat. Made For.
While he's doing that, William, it'd be really cool if you could make it to. We have an event tomorrow night over at the Auto Addiction OC, which is like a car storage center, but it's got classic cars also. Your parents might really kind of like that as well, and You could actually be at the table and talking about events and things like that. And then, of course, we've got, like we talked about, the 21st and the 28th are two things. So John will give you all the details, the information, but if you could pull it off, that'd be really cool.
Cedric, it's Tuesday night, the 29th, right? Is at Auto Addiction.
Yeah, that's tomorrow, right? Oh, you're right. Today's Sunday. I'm sorry, Tuesday. I thought today was Monday.
Really would love to have you there, William, because it's a membership drive for Rotary and for Interact, and we're going to have a couple other clubs with their Interact members are going to be there, so you'll get a chance to interact with other interactors. And plus, the Auto Addiction is an amazing 50,000 square foot building of 350,000 amazing cars, antiques, new ones, BMWs, DeLoreans, you name it, it's there. So
Pat, where do you live?
I live in Los Angeles,
Okay.
so not too far away.
All right. Well, hey,
I'm going to cut out. This has
Yep,
been
John,
very
I think-
interesting.
John, I think
And,
I got to
okay.
cut out here, so we're gonna lose our
Okay.
Zoom. So
all right, thanks
Hey,
for
Pat,
that.
guys.
thanks so much,
Thanks so
William.
much.
Good to
Thanks
meet
again,
you,
man.
Pat.
Appreciate you, bud.
Have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Thanks, Lane.
And
Bye.
Pat, again, thank you so much for your time and your
my
information.
pleasure.
Your
And
insight.
Lane, we need your help to get this message out. Oh, he's gone. Oh well. So, John, what I would do is reach out to Lane at some point. Thanks, William.
Bye.
I would probably reach out to Lane and see how he might be able to. Let me stop recording real quick. Yes.